So yes, I'm aware by the time this video comes out, the Retroid Pocket 5 has already been out for a while. I've had a really busy year with life stuff and all that, and I haven't gotten around to putting this video up. I just kept pushing it back and back. For a while, I thought about not posting my 100-hour review on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, but then I was like, what the heck? I'm sure there's someone out there that can benefit from last year's model review in 2025. And plus, I put 100 hours of gameplay in this device, so gosh darn it, I'm gonna make the best review possible for the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. Next time, I won't wait a year to post a review about a retro handheld because they come out so flippin' often. And yes, as the video title suggests, I played 100 beautiful hours of gameplay in the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, everything from Castlevania Bloodlines to SSX3 on the PS2 and much more. I put some games just a couple hours into it, and then other games I played to completion, and then in between that kind of timeline. No, this is not clickbait, just a retro game enthusiast playing a lot of hours on a device so that you can get an idea of how it reviews after some real wear and tear on the thing. If you're at all familiar with this channel, I like to do these 100-hour review on devices, retro handhelds in particular, for as many as possible. I can't do it for all of them just because I'm one guy here making content and I don't do this full time, but I try. The point of these 100-hour review videos are to simulate what it's like to actually own the device. Over time, I learned that I like certain things, dislike other things, and I find out the little quirks about the device, and certain things just kind of pop up over time after you play on it for a while. Quick little plug here, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you like these reviews. They do take a lot of effort and time to make, so the support is very much appreciated. Little spoiler alert here, I really like this device, which is not a surprise because I've liked all the Retroid devices. Whether this device is good for you, well, that's what I'm going to answer in this video, so stay tuned and we're going to go in-depth review on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro and whether it's right for you. Stay tuned. Don't leave this video. I hope that didn't make you leave this video. It's going to get better from here, I promise. When I did my review on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, I was a big fan of the quality of builds with that device. However, it did kind of remind me of a cell phone that had like a button grip built around it. Not a deal breaker, but a little bit of a con in the overall rating because when I purchased a retro handheld, I wanted to give me a retro gaming vibe. The Retroid Pocket 4 Pro improves on this both in the quality of the feel of the plastic, plus it feels less like a modded phone and more like a gaming console. The joysticks feel buttery smooth, like Hall joysticks should, which is nice, but I can see how some people might prefer a more rigid analog stick, kind of like what we see with older game consoles. Again, to give you that retro feel. In a way, I can see how the joysticks on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro reminds me of the quick, cheap renovations that you put on a house. It looks nice and modern, but it's more or less a cheap upgrade to feel more premium, if that makes sense. I'm reading too much into this, so let's move on. The buttons all feel great. They're like the perfect amount of clicky with rubber membrane to offset some of that clicky sound. Retroid went with the analog triggers this time. They feel really nice and smooth. Personally though, I'm not the biggest fan of these kinds of triggers. I can see the appeal, but I just prefer a regular clicky trigger with a simple raw input. Quick comment on the position of the buttons. Retroid was really smart with the way they placed the buttons on this console. And here's what I mean about Retroid being smart about where they place the buttons. All the buttons that are typically where they're supposed to be are where they're supposed to be. Like the triggers are on the top, the face buttons are on the right, you got your analog sticks and your D-pad, like any other handheld. However, this time they did opt to put the home button as well as the back button on the front of the console. This is really important because on the last device with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, they put the home button on the side of the console, which means that sometimes you're accidentally clicking it and going to the home screen, which is not what you want to do when you're playing a game. They also didn't put any buttons in hard to reach places on the top except for the power button and the volume buttons, which you are just not using as often. Again, the plastic feels really nice on this device. It has more of a texture on the plastic versus the smooth feeling plastic of the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, plus it just feels more premium. Personally, I prefer the feel of this plastic, although I will say it is a little bit less grippy despite the texture being on it, and sometimes I worry that I'm going to drop this device. It might be worth it to purchase a grip. I like the engraved logo on the back. You'll also notice that the fan here is on the back. Most of the time this thing runs quiet. However, when connected via the USB-C port to the TV, it automatically turns into the performance mode, and this device runs really loud on performance mode. That fan is working like a jet engine. Later on though, I found out that the Retroid fixed this with an update. Still have yet to test that, whether it's actually fixed, but apparently it has been fixed. This is not the most pocketable device out there, particularly because of the triggers protruding out the back. It often gets caught in my pants, and because I'm paranoid the triggers will break due to the defect on the initial models, this does bother me. So if you're thinking about taking this Retroid Pocket 4 Pro to a house party so that you can impress that one girl with your huge collection of PS2 games that run great on this device, by the way, well, you might want to just leave that at home because it'll be a little bit uncomfy carrying that thing around in your tight jean pockets all night. This time around, I spent a lot more time on the setup of the device. I wanted it to feel like a handheld console from the moment I booted up. None of that Android home screen BS that makes the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro feel like a cheap Android phone with control sticks attached to it. To accomplish this, I used Daigisho. You've probably already heard about Daigisho from all the other big retro game YouTubers that recommend it, but to quickly summarize, Daigisho is a front end. What is a front end? It's literally just a way to manage everything on your Retroid Pocket in a user interface that looks different than your standard Android home screen. Everything is still there, just tucked away in a settings tab. The main focus when you boot up the front end is the games. Everything else, like settings and different apps, are all still there, just tucked away like we threw everything into a closet and shut the door. Yeah, baby, look at that nice, clean room. I mean, front end. Don't open that door. To get Daigisho on your device, just go to the Google Play Store and download it, and then install it. That's it. You got it? That's all you got to do. Now you have Daigisho on your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. Then you'll have this nice looking front end that looks and feels like a gaming console. I mean, look at that thing. Isn't it just lovely? Make sure you set it up as your boot up home screen so that whenever you turn on your device, you'll be taken straight to Daigisho and never, ever, 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 ever have to see that Android home screen ever again. There are other things you're going to want to set up, like, getting your games to actually show up, which is pretty important. I use Retro Game Core's guide. It's pretty easy to follow. And that's it. You have a nice front end for your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, and it feels even more like a gaming device. Now, when it comes to gameplay, you're probably wanting to see what this bad boy can handle. Like, show me some Switch gameplay, which I'll respond with, Switch, do you think I'm crazy? I'm not opening my channel up to copyright strikes from Nintendo Ninjas. Have you lost your mind? But it totally can. Okay, well, what about GameCube, PS2, Wii, 3DS? Don't worry, we'll get to that, but rest assured, SSX3 for the PS2 plays beautifully in native widescreen, which I know is what you care most about. Let's talk about the retro games first. The first game I ever played on the Retro Pocket 4 Pro was actually Castlevania Bloodlines, one of the OG Castlevania games that, as you can imagine, is much harder than the modern ones, and I didn't get very far, but it was really fun. And I'm not even going to say that obviously it runs great, because obviously it runs great on literally any retro handheld ever. I will say, though, that the Retro Pocket 4 Pro handles platformers very nicely. No problem hitting my diagonal hits at all. I also played a lot of Ocarina of Time. Probably the best way to play Ocarina of Time would be through a standalone emulator, but I played it through RetroArch so that I could collect retro achievements. N64 on the RetroArch does not like front ends for whatever reason, so if I start Ocarina of Time on Daigisho like this, the game will boot up, but it won't register the buttons and joystick. However, if you go to the apps, then hit RetroArch, then boot up an N64 game through RetroArch directly, it'll work normally. One thing that drove me absolutely bonkers with N64 emulation was mapping the buttons correctly. It's difficult to explain why it's such a pain in the rear, but basically because the Retro Pocket 4 Pro is naturally configured with a button layout like this, RetroArch has so much trouble figuring out which button is the A button and which one's the B button, and then you try to set it up like an N64 controller like this, it becomes an absolute mind bleep to get the buttons mapped correctly so that it feels natural. I end up trying random configurations till it works right, and then if I want to play in docked mode, like on a TV with a controller, I have to do it all over again with my Xbox controller since it thinks that the A and B buttons are in different places now. Ugh, it's really aggravating. Anyway, playing Ocarina of Time was a blast. Now, there are other older games that I played, like Pokemon Heart Gold, which I actually played a lot of. I like playing DS games on Retroid devices, not only because they run well, but because they have a touchscreen and it makes playing DS games a bit easier. Again, I played Pokemon Heart Gold on the RetroArch via their DS Core, which is just another name for an emulator. Normally, RetroArch cores don't run as well as standalone emulators for the DS specifically, but this game ran great without any slowdowns. I ended up using this one large screen and one smaller screen in the corner layout because I didn't want to play on only one screen, and the two equal screen layout just made them too small. For Pokemon, all the action happens on the top screen except for things like your pack and choosing attacks, so it didn't really matter. I don't want to talk too much more about other retro consoles because the reality is they will all run perfectly fine. You don't need anything too powerful to run everything from the NES to the N64, PS1, Dreamcast era. Just keep in mind that this console has a 16:9 aspect ratio, which none of the other retro consoles run on, so you'll have to have bezels or a super stretched out display. Moving on to GameCube, I put a lot of time into GameCube on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, mostly due to how well the local split screen works. You can connect a simple USB-C dock, like this one right here, to your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro and then plug an HDMI out and charging cable into this dock to have a very consoleized version of your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. Then connecting your Xbox or PlayStation controller is as simple as putting that controller in a pairing mode and pairing it via Bluetooth on your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. Then the controller will always connect automatically to your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro in the future, unless you pair it with another console, of course. Now, for GameCube, you will want to use Dolphin, and in Dolphin, you'll need to configure all the external controllers. Luckily, it's pretty simple, and I made a whole video explaining the process, which I'll link in the description and, put in the little corner in the screen. And now you can play GameCube multiplayer with your friends. I did this with my wife and my brother and his wife, and we had a lot of fun playing games like Kirby Air Ride and 007 Nightfire. I also played a ton of Mario Superstar Baseball with my wife, which is honestly one of the best Mario sport games ever made. Now, I won't say that this is going to be as seamless as a modern console like the Nintendo Switch. Sometimes the controllers will take some input finagling to make sure Dolphin registers each controller, and oftentimes you'll end up having to figure out which controller is player one and stuff like that. But on a scale of 1 to 10, on the tech savvy scale, this is like a 3 or 4 in knowledge level to make it work. Pretty much every GameCube game ran great with minor tinkering on the graphical glitches on a few of them. I'll leave a link to the spreadsheet that lists the specific optimized settings you can do for specific games, but most games can run on these Dolphin settings just fine. I'll put them in the screen here in the corner so that you can see. Did you see the settings? Great. Those are the great Dolphin settings that'll work for pretty much every game. By the way, if you want to see more GameCube gameplay, I have a whole video on how the GameCube plays on the Retro Pocket 4 Pro. Also, I should mention that Retro Achievements has recently been added for GameCube. However, this is only on the PC versions of Dolphin at this time. Unfortunately, Android Dolphin doesn't support Retro Achievements yet. But I can't wait until it does because I am going to be all over that. It's going to be great. PS2 also runs great on the Retro Pocket 4 Pro, although some games will have issues. For example, Sly Cooper is particularly finicky. This is more of an emulator issue as opposed to hardware issue because Sly Cooper will run like garbage on the newer version of Aether SX2, the gold standard for Android PS2 emulation, but it will totally run fine on the older version number 3668. By the way, Aether SX2 does not receive support anymore, but there is a separate build called Nether SX2, which will receive support from the community. I believe I could be wrong about that part, but I'm pretty sure that that's correct. One thing you should totally do when playing PS2 games is take advantage of the native widescreen mode, which is available on a lot of titles. I did this while playing SSX3, but keep in mind, unlike a traditional PS2, you will not set this up in the actual game's menu. That'll screw up the resolution. Instead, you go to Nether or Aether settings and select widescreen hack there. Then set the aspect ratio to 16:9. Instead of getting a stretched out display, you'll actually get a larger field of view that looks nice on a wide screen. This is something that PS2 developers included natively on the PS2 console, so it's nice to see that it translated well into emulation. Anyway, PS2 runs smooth on the Retro Pocket 4 Pro, but you won't be able to use a higher upscale multiplier like you can do with higher budget Android handhelds like the Odin 2, for example. But those consoles are way more expensive, hence the old saying, you get what you pay for. But honestly, playing on a lower upscale looks totally fine, so I'm happy with what I'm getting out of the Retro Pocket 4 Pro's PS2 performance. By the way, I made a whole video on PS2 game performance on the Retro Pocket 4 Pro where I played like 25 hours worth of PS2 games on it. Simpsons Hit and Run is so much fun, and SSX3 too, of course, the GOAT of all snowboarding games. Wii games tend to run pretty smoothly depending on the game. Toy Story 3 seemed to have issues for whatever reason, not sure why. I'm not a fan of playing motion-based games on the handheld like this. Sure, you can map motions of the Wii remote to certain functions on the gamepad, but it just kind of feels weird. If you plan on playing different Wii games that require different various usages of the Wii remote, you'll probably find yourself changing the bindings of your controls pretty often. For example, New Super Mario Bros. Wii plays for the most part like a standard platformer, but if you pick up the propeller hat, you can't use that dash up ability without turning on the up motion of your Wii remote. There is a way to bind this to a button, you just got to make sure that you set that in the menu. By the way, if you've never played Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, this is one of my favorite Fire Emblem games of all time. In fact, I think it's my favorite. It's long, but the story is great, and the maps are fantastic. This is the perfect kind of game to play on your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro because it runs great, and it's just nice to play it in a handheld format. Just given that it's essentially an anime chess, which is a cozy, relaxing game that's great to just play on the couch while you relax. 3DS played pretty good. I'd give it an A-. I used Lime 3DS, which is a fork of Citra. I used Vulkan for the graphics with a 2x resolution. Pretty much every game played fine with minor stuttering. Like, all the games had some level of occasional stuttering, even if it's just very faint. Personally, I think it's totally playable, even for most action-based games. One thing I found odd though was that loading save states made the games significantly underperform to the point where the stuttering was actually really annoying. You ultimately had to play through the game's internal saves. Maybe there's a workaround for this, but I'm not aware of any. But yeah, if you like 3DS, you'll be able to play that on the 3DS. I mean, Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I gave the Wii U a shot, but I gotta say it's not worth it on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I tried a couple of games and they just ran horribly. I'm not sure if this is a CEMU emulation error for Android devices, or maybe the version of CEMU that I was using. Anyway, wasn't able to get it work. Could be the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro's processing power, but I don't think that's the case. I did some research online and it sounds like Switch actually runs a lot better than Wii U. I'm not going to show any Switch emulation on this video because it's a modern console and I don't want to get any risks of a copy strike. I've also seen other people get some sort of Wii U emulation to work on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. How they did this, I'm not sure, to be honest. If someone knows, let me know in the comments below because I really don't know how to get it to work. But as of today, the Wii U emulation I do not recommend for the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I want to talk a little bit more about the multiplayer experience on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I know I kind of teased it earlier, but it's really worth devoting more time to this topic because in my opinion, the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro makes an excellent home console in addition to it being a convenient handheld. I actually made an entire video on the split-screen multiplayer experience on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, which you should totally check out. During my video, I went over the setup process, and at first, the multiplayer experience can seem like a kind of a hassle to set up, and if you are terrible with tech, you might get frustrated. But now, I got into a rhythm while playing with my wife almost every night for a week, and it's awesome because basically we had our two Xbox controllers that we didn't use for anything except the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. Simply plug the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro into the dock, turn on the controllers which are already paired, turn on the Dolphin emulator, and start playing multiplayer. We wouldn't have to remap the buttons or anything like that because those settings were saved in Dolphin already. Quick side note, Retroid actually made an official dock that connects to the USB-C port on the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. You can plug a power source to it, an HDMI, and then just leave it by your TV and plop your Retroid Pocket 4 Pro on whenever you want to play it on a TV. We played so much Super Mario Baseball, or actually I think it's called Mario Superstar Baseball. This is a really fun baseball game with surprisingly complex mechanics that make for very interesting multiplayer. Also, having save states is a great option for when you want to spend some time setting up a particular game mode, and instead of having to set it up again later, you can just create a save state for that game mode. As I conclude this video, I ask myself, what more is there to say about last year's model of Retroid handhelds? Well, it's last year's model. It's better than the 3, and from what I hear, it's not as good as the 5. I like that Retroid doesn't make a bunch of variations of the same type of handheld. It seems like each year they just innovate and improve that mid-market of the retro handheld market. The Retroid Pocket 4 Pro is a solid handheld with solid design. I really highly recommend it. But here's the kicker. In my opinion, it's just not quite good enough price difference than the Retroid Pocket 5 to make it worth it at the moment. If you're watching this video as it comes out, I would spring for the 5 or wait for the secondhand market for this device to get cheaper, or some really good deal on AliExpress or Amazon. Full disclosure, I have not purchased the 5, nor have I tested it. I'm just basing this recommendation off what I've already seen from reviewers and the specs. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this review. I really liked playing on my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro this year. It served everything I need from a handheld and some. If I wasn't so darn busy this year, I would have made this review ages ago. But alas, here we are. 100 hours of great games were played, and that's what matters. You burn bright, Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, just not very long. There's a brighter star out there, and you just won't get the attention you deserve. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Good night and goodbye. Unless you're watching this in the morning or early afternoon, then good day, sir or madam. So long, partner. Okay, yeah, bye for real.